welcome to another episode of the Puncher's Chance podcast. I'm John Lodge, coming to you from the Sports Lodge, and joined as always by Jordan Grenke, coming to you from Castle Grenke. And Jordan, we had an excellent co-main and main event on UFC Fight Night last weekend, but I don't want to get into that right away. First thing I have to say is, man, how pissed are you that the Lions aren't in the NFC East?
It would be amazing if that was the case. Honestly, we'd be in such a better position at this point. Like, playing decent against really, really shitty teams is like the MO. So why not just, put ourselves in a different division so it'd actually be top 5?
Well, I mean, how does Dallas land in the NFC East and Detroit isn't in the East? That just geographically doesn't make any sense.
I hate all that stuff. You know, like I love how you have, you know, in basketball, you have, you know, the East versus the West. I love in hockey how everything kind of comes together. But at least hockey has got it somewhat, and baseball kind of seems like they run in the same lanes. But when it comes to football, I have no idea. I don't know why. Aren't both New York teams in different divisions?
The AFC, they're in different leagues. So the Giants are in the NFC East, which makes sense, East, and the Jets are in the AFC East, right? So I can kind of
see that.
I was looking at the divisions. I was just like, why aren't the Lions in the NFC East? It absolutely makes no sense, and it would be so beneficial for them if they got to play against the tire fire that is the NFC East. I mean, we got a barn burner tonight, Giants versus Eagles. So I definitely didn't have to bend my fingers back to get me to record a podcast during that game.
Yeah, more going on than I don't know. I was so excited about football, and it was coming back, and then we talked about how we wouldn't be able to kind of live without it. And then now, like, here we are, and it's like, I don't know, the season has been like anticlimactic for me in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like it's either games are lights out, it's amazing, I can't miss them, or it's like I don't watch Thursday night. I've barely watched any Monday night games, but Sunday I still tune in.
Man, just look on the bright side. You got the same record as the New England Patriots.
Right? With Cam Newton. Like, you know, we're the same old Lions, right? SOL is a Detroit Lions thing where they call it SOL, same old Lions, you know, fourth quarter. But I did see that. I sent you that funny thing where it was like, if we are, forget it, what it was, but it was that if 2020 was a football season, like, you know, so far we're the Detroit Lions because we're hopefully, or we're not. I don't remember. I'm fucking it up anyway. So edit this part out. It was shit.
I think I know the meme you were talking about. Actually, you just hope you're playing against the Detroit Lions because
Lions. Yes, that's what it was.
The fourth quarter's coming up
because you'll win the fourth quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
I knew it was something along those lines.
That was quite funny. I guess we should get out of the football talk. People don't come here to listen to us talk about football. They come here to listen to us talk about fights and the UFC. And we had a pretty good one on Saturday and a couple of victories in the co-main and main that a lot of people did not see coming. Let's start off with co-main with Andrade, and I had talked to you last week, and we had agreed that the book is out on Andrade, and we were expecting another loss to her record, but she put a stop to all that, and she put a stop to it in a quite aggressive way that made her opponent run away.
Honestly, I gotta say, like, you could see the difference in height, and you could definitely see the difference in reach with Andrade and Chikagan. And then what I couldn't believe, John, was you had a situation where Andrade was fighting a way to the inside and really doing a lot of damage. Like, not even for a short. Look at people like John Jones, people like Israel Adesanya. They use their length, their advantage. I mean, John Jones is probably the best that we've ever seen in the game. But distance management is something that is now going to be something that is going to be a prevalent factor in a lot of female MMA as well. So Caitlin Chikagan just was not doing that. She wasn't properly using her distance. She was allowing Jessica Andrade to get on the inside and do damage. Now, I mean, the fact that Jessica Andrade's power is translating from 115 to 135 or back up to 125 is incredible, because, you know, muscle can deteriorate as you take it off your body and when you're cutting weight. And it seems that Andrade is getting stronger. And those body shots, they started adding up. Teddy Atlas has an amazing quote, which I believe I said on the broadcast, but it's a pretty famous quote, where he said, body shots are like putting water in the basement, because eventually it comes all the way up and your house can't take it, or the foundation ruptures. And Jessica Andrade, she made it look pretty. I mean, you're talking about the number one flyweight contender, right? Who lost to Shevchenko and then beat Shevchenko's sister. So she was right back in the mix. Jessica Andrade moves up a weight class, takes the number one spot with flying colors. It was beautiful. I was happy and privileged to say that I was wrong. But yeah, 5 seconds to go in the first round, and Jessica Andrade not only wins the fight, but wins it with a finish.
Yeah, the body's bigger than the head, right? And while Andrade was landing headshots, she knew at the right moment when to switch and land that key body shot, and they can be crippling blows. You land those to the ribs, you land those to the lung area, it's hard to breathe, it bruises quickly. We've seen it before, so body shots have been key in a lot of fights. It cost Daniel Cormier a fight with Stipe in the rematch in DC Stipe 2. So yeah, it's a big thing in the UFC, body shots. But man, what stood out for me was the fact that and I can't pronounce her last name, so I'm not going to try. Chikagan there. You saved my ass again. But Chikagan, she got hit, and then instead of engaging and trying to return and save herself, her body or her mentality was to flee. It wasn't to fight. Right. And that was shocking to me. And that speaks to the power that Andrade was landing, right? You didn't want to be in there with her. You knew that you were outclassed. So good for her in rewriting her book and changing a couple things about her. But my wonder here is she going to hit a glass ceiling? She's tried for the title and she's lost it, and then so does she have a glass ceiling a la Robert Whittaker, which we might see in 254 coming up?
I'm really glad that you used Robert Whittaker. I think that once you climb the mountain, right, that it's harder to stay on top of it, with everybody kind of pulling at your ankles. And George St. Pierre was kind of the one that really articulated this in a lot of his interviews, especially during his UFC days, that it's easy to win the title, but it's harder to stay champion. You always have people who, instead of you looking at the champion, trying to take that person down, you've got an entire division of people who are trying to figure out ways to beat your game and to solve your puzzle. And the longer that you fight for, the more hours, or in this case, minutes of footage that you have to study. And you have to keep evolving and growing while also, maintaining champion status. So what I like about it is you use a Robert Whittaker instance where he goes up, he wins the title, he's the next big thing, has a couple of really, really tough fights, and then, ultimately gets stopped by Izzy in front of, one of the biggest crowd in UFC history. So, but then he comes back and he has an unbelievably almost could have been fight of the year with a little bit more blood fight against Darren Till. And if you ever want to see a technical striking battle with two of the best, you go watch that fight. It was incredible. So I don't know where Robert Whittaker's ceiling is. He seems to be having a lot more fun these days. I think Andrade kind of had the same problem. Her first title defense was against Weili Zhang, all the way in Weili Zhang's home, country of China. And the UFC were trying to grow their product there. So Jessica Andrade kind of was thrown into this very unchampionship or unchampion-like situation where you're going to defending your belt for the first time in someone else's backyard. But I guess it kind of made sense because she had won it in her own backyard. So there's just some weird stuff going on there. I think the travel and a lot had to do with that as well. Very close fight against Rose Namajunas when Andrade came back. A win that she desperately wanted back. She didn't look bad in that fight. It took her a little while to get going, and by the time she did get going, it was a little bit too late. So I think the 3-round fight and the less of a weight cut for her made a huge difference. But you saw a little bit of improved head work. You saw her come forward, which is the traditional style that she made her first impact in the UFC in. She has fought one weight class above this and has done well as well. So where she goes, I think she's still somehow, even though she's now a former champion, still trying to find her own way into what makes sense. I think she's found a good size for for herself, a good weight that she can stay at. Now she can build muscle on with this frame. She can start evolving her training around being a 125er. You know, the more women's weight classes that we see, the more contenders can kind of come back and forth. But I think you now have a very, very exciting challenge for Valentina Shevchenko, the longtime champion, who it seems to be there's a large gap between her and the rest of the division. You put Jessica Andrade, former champion, who had close fights with Joanna, who stopped, you know, Rose Namajunas, big time fighter, and it makes it very interesting for a division with very, very few contenders. So I love what I'm seeing. I now absolutely will take my words back. If I had a shoe beside me, I would shove it in my mouth. I will eat my own words. I will eat crow, whatever you want to call it. I was 100% wrong about Jessica Andrade. She looked fluid. She looked fearless, and I love what I saw. And I love body shots, man. They're the best. So I think the best is actually still yet to come. And even though a week ago I was saying that the best was over, so I've got a lot of learning to do as far as where I see, and the amount of growth that woman can do in the span of, you know, 4 or 5 months is just sincerely incredible.
Well, I mean, I don't think you were alone in judging where Andrade's career was headed. It wasn't looking good up from her previous couple bouts, but like I said, she rewrote the book. She changed a couple things, and she dominated, right? So not alone in that assumption, and you definitely weren't alone in the assumption that Brian Ortega wouldn't have been able to hold his own in a fight with the Korean Zombie. But not only did he hold his own in that fight, he fought a perfect fight. He got 5, 10, 8 rounds. He got a perfect fight. That's almost unheard of.
You know, we were talking about this. Yes, John, you were 100% right. I mean, sometimes you hear fighters talk about during fight week that it's I'm reinvented. It's me 2.0. It's the new and improved me. And I mean, I would say probably 85% of the time it's fugazi. It's no good. Brian Ortega was talking about Brian Ortega 2.0. Leading all the way up to this fight quietly. He wasn't rubbing it in our faces or wasn't trying to posture up the way he normally does, but it really was a different kind of fighter. The stance was different. The only thing that was similar was the way he was setting up strikes, but he basically did 5 really, really key things. And this, as a fan of mixed martial arts, was one of the funnest fights I've got to watch. I know people like slobber knockers and people love a good physical, love when people get cut and big finishes. This to me was a masterclass. The way that he mixed his inside and outside approaches was really the thing that I thought was the most calculated thing. He was mainly an outside fighter who would lunge in sometimes or wasn't really countering properly, especially the Max Holloway fight. Max Holloway was quicker, more diverse strikes, and better setups. Brian Ortega's had great setups in the past, either the way he caught Frank Yeager, the way he's finished other people like that, but he kind of takes him a little while, and he's either inside or he's outside it. But he was mixing it up, mixing both those things up very, very well. He was able to also take calculated risks without getting into a brawl. Now, I know he likes a good brawl, and that is how he has some of the finishes, a la the Frank Yeager fight, like I mentioned. Also, the way that he was diversified and the way he was diversifying his targets, but also the weapons. So what I mean by targets is head, legs, or body, head. Or if you're kicking, legs, side, high kick. He was doing things like punch the head, low kick, punch to the body punch, high kick. It was diversifying both the targets and the weapons. And what he did so well while he was doing that was taking the inside and the outside, diversifying his attack, but also he was using motion and his tempo to disguise his offense. That, to me, was just confusing the Korean Zombie, because he's a counter striker. But if you were the best counter strikers in the world are the people that can pick up rhythms, can judge reactions, and can basically plan and almost predict. That's what makes a great counter striker. Anderson Silva famously would take the first minute of every fight he was ever in to see how you were bouncing, almost take a mental rhythm as to where you're going to go. If you favored one foot more than the other, he'd get you to react 2 or 3 times, and you'd see him pick his head up from your body, up to your shoulders or your face, and then you were pretty much, he had most of it figured out. Brian Ortega was doing some of this stuff as well. He was picking up on reactions, but Chen Guangzheng could not do the same thing, right? So all those things together, also, he was always maintaining a rage where he would have the advantage. When the Korean Zombie would look like he was getting frustrated, you then saw him take a step back and then start picking apart with the outside, inside leg kicks, outside leg kicks. When he closed the distance, he'd be in range, but not at the range of a counter. He'd be within, when you saw the spinning attack that really put the Korean Zombie on his ass, that was a setup that you've seen him do in fights before. You've seen him do it at the Max Holloway fight where he almost caught Max. You've seen him use that technique before. So when he combined these 5 things, and he spent the last, arguably 18 months or so, give or take, perfecting these things and putting them into his game, it makes him a completely different fighter whatsoever. The scary thing is, John, Brian Ortega is so good on the ground that now he's a master at it, that he is now mastering the stand-up portion and the wrestling approach to his game now, which I think is terrifying. There's nothing short of that being terrifying. The fact that Brian Ortega is at the top of the heap as far as jiu-jitsu goes, he's going to piece together the wrestling a little bit, and now he's going to be lights out on the feet. So you are looking at likely probably the future of the division. And I have not seen a performance of that caliber since maybe Dillashaw when he knocked out Renan Barão.
So I took a few things from that and a few things from the fight, and from my layman's point of view, my less intelligent, I'll say, point of view. I think he was taking advantage of a situation of the exact opposite of Robert Whittaker and Jessica Andrade. 18 months not having any footage for Chang to go over of this new Brian Ortega. All he had to look at was the old Brian Ortega and exactly what he did. And I think that he was playing on that mentality as well with the Zombie. He was going and he was tapping the leg, acting as if he was going to do the old things that he would do. And then when he went and tapped the leg and the Zombie went to move, he bam, body shot, right? Or bang, hit him with the head. You talk about the spinning attack. I think he actually missed what his intended point of attack was. He would have hit him with that elbow point if he or well, not the point, but the bone of the elbow, as opposed to hitting him with the meat of the bicep. It did a lot of damage to Chang with the bicep. But if he hits him with the elbow, that's lights out. He's done, right? You talked about him setting that sort of stuff up, and I think if you were to talk to him, he would be like, yeah, I set it up, but I just missed it, right? And I didn't hit it as flush as I wanted to hit it. Brian Ortega, definitely a different type of guy. Master of the ground game, a master of the submission game. The standing guillotine is nasty. It'll be in highlight reels forever. And like you said, probably the future of that division. Has he got himself back into the title fight already, though, with that kind of a performance against a guy like Chang?
I absolutely do. I think it's one thing to have a performance, or one thing to get the W, and you might be in line, right? But he kind of be 1-1 in his last 2 fights. That was a statement. What you saw was an absolute statement in even the way the shaved head coming in, the traditional Mexican music, the whole approach. I went back for the fun, but halfway through the 3rd round, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to, in the middle of the fight, I'm watching, I'm enjoying it. I got money on Ortega. I'm having the time of my life. And I will answer the question in a second, but I'm going back and I'm looking at all the pundits, the MMA junk, the SB Nation, Bloody Elbow. I'm going through everybody's predictions, right? Even the really bold ones saying that, he was going to find a way to get to the floor and implement his jiu-jitsu. Not one of these predictions from all the pundits on all the major sites, right? CBS, ESPN, you name it. Not one single site, ourselves included, right, ever mentioned that he would go toe-to-toe with the Korean Zombie and outpoint and outstrike him over the course of 5 rounds and badly hurt him twice. No one predicted that. That's why I say it was such a statement. It was a statement for him, for the rest of the division, for the entire MMA community, whether you're a fan, fighter, or journalist. If I was Alexander Volkanovski, who is a tough SOB, I would be like, oh, shit. And I don't think that we even saw half of what Brian Ortega has managed to put together. I mentioned those 5 things: maintaining the range, motion and tempo, diversifying the targets, calculated risks, no brawling, and the inside-outside. You're going to watch him build on that. Imagine trying something brand new, Lodge, and then realizing that you're really fucking good at it. And then what do you do when you get home? You keep going. And so it's going to be a hard fight for Volkanovski. He definitely earned himself a title shot. You know, we've seen Holloway and Volkanovski twice. I think Max won both fights, to be honest. I give the first one to Volkanovski, but Max definitely won the second fight. It's too early to see that fight again. And there's not a whole slew of contenders. You know, Frankie's having a rough time lately. We got to see Zabit versus Yair, Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Kattar. I want to see Calvin Kattar versus Holloway. And you know, the division's got to work itself out. But Brian Ortega is standing at the heap, waiting for Alexander the Great. If I was a decent graphic designer, I'd make it a huge mountain with, you know, one person climbing up, and it's going to be a hell of a fight. But I think we see Ortega get his hand raised. I think he's going to be too many different areas. The one thing you don't want to do with Ortega is go to the ground, but now you don't want to stand up either. It's like, how are you going to game plan for that? It's going to be interesting.
At the risk of sounding like an idiot, Brian Ortega is much taller than Volkanovski, is he not?
He is.
So he would have
about the same height as Holloway.
He'd have a great reach advantage, just like Holloway or had a great reach advantage, and that's another plus to Ortega that Volkanovski is going to have to overcome. So, like you said, what do? Do you go to the ground? Probably not. Do you want to strike with him? How do you get inside and not get clipped?
Right.
So
Brian Ortega is still going. Yeah. I mean, listen, Alexander Volkanovski is an incredible athlete.
I mean, I do not think he won that last fight against Holloway. I 100% agree with you. I just I think that the UFC didn't want to take the title off of the champion in that manner, which was just so strange. But yeah, definitely did not win that last fight against Holloway.
No, I don't even know how people think he won that fight. To me, it was an easy fight. One of those, you know, the judges got it wrong kind of thing. But yeah, you're looking at probably you know, Alexander Volkanovski is about 5'5.5", and you're looking at Brian Ortega sitting at a comfortable 5'9". So there's a big discrepancy in height, and you know, again, it would definitely be interesting, man. They got to make that happen.
All right, moving on to some fights that are happening. We've got a big pay-per-view coming up midday.
What pay-per-view? What are you talking about?
Midday, Jordan. How do you justify cracking a cold one at 10:30 in the morning with your cereal for the prelims?
Nothing makes me happier than this. The fact that also let's also put this in perspective too. A few weeks ago, I'm pretty sure that the main event, I'm pretty sure this was the fight that just happened. Like, the main event was starting at like 9:20. And like, I love that stuff. I like staying up late sometimes, but man, those mornings come early. The fact that I'm going to get a whole day of fights on Saturday, still have my evening to process. We could do one of these at 10:30 on Saturday, do like a live recap. You know what I mean? I love having that time. You justify it because you are Khabib Nurmagomedov. You command an unbelievable Middle Eastern audience, a massive European audience, and basically all of Russia will tune in. I always like to say that Eastern Standard Time is the one true time zone. But when you're Khabib Nurmagomedov and you're fighting on Fight Island, and you basically have an entire side of the world following you, you do whatever you want. And if Khabib wants to fight at regular time that he's been training at because he's earned that advantage, you go right ahead. If this was not a pandemic, though, if we were looking at pay-per-view buys and people being able to go to bars and have large gatherings in the States, you'd probably see a little bit more pushback about that. So I think that both those things, Khabib being that sort of side of the world, being the star that he is, as well as, you know, bars even in Canada, like, they're starting to shut down again. Gatherings are frowned upon. So it dodges a pretty large bullet for the UFC. You know, why not? What else is going on Saturday afternoon? They're going to have this card out of the way before football or the meaningful college football games, let's say. Like, this is going to be perfect placement for them.
The only other time it's happened in UFC history was for Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, so it makes sense that they do it again.
Mhm.
I would contend that the population in Russia that is going to tune in and buy this pay-per-view would probably rival that of who's going to tune in and buy the pay-per-view in North America, just simply based on who's going to
Easily.
be there. I believe it is his brother fighting on the card as well.
I'll be
Saeed.
honest with you, John. Our job is hard enough as it is with like 600 stable rosters. We barely find. I think every week in the rundown we try and talk about Bellator. We can't even talk about Bellator. We there's so many Nurmagomedovs now in the UFC. I don't know. I have to get an ancestry.com. I'm not even kidding. I actually went to look it up, and there's articles that are poorly written that have the people that are men. I don't know what to think. I know who Khabib is, and that's good for me. You know, I know there's 3 other Nurmagomedovs in the UFC, and there's 1 in Bellator. I don't know how to possibly keep up with this. So your guess is as good as mine. There's a Nurmagomedov fighting somewhere.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Saeed is fighting. I don't know. I can't say that.
No, he just fought.
Okay,
he fought on this card.
Okay, yeah.
And he had a 52-second win. Yes.
Yes, Saeed fought. Okay, so I knew we had a Nurmagomedov fight recently.
We need a checklist.
There's two.
Who's
like you said,
who's up next?
There's too many of them going on. What I wanted to get at with the 2 p.m. Start, and that the 2 p.m. is the pay-per-view. It is 10:30 in the morning for the prelims here in the Eastern time zone.
Yeah.
So, are you drinking a beer for the first fight at 10:30 in the morning Eastern time zone?
That would mean that kickoff for the event would technically be 10:15. The 50-minute lead in, first fight at 10:30. Yeah, I'll see. Yeah, maybe I hold off. Maybe I hold off until the early prelims. And without going over the whole card, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a second, but I mean, there's some fights that are, to me, are just kind of on there. I know apparently Khabib had 3 fight requests, and so for people that, not to get too behind the scenes or letting down the fourth wall too much, but when you're the champion, and you have these big cards, you actually can go to the UFC and say, I want, my teammate to fight or a friend of yours to fight on it. Conor's done it with his friends and the SPG guys. Of course, Khabib's going to do it. So I think Khabib had a total of like 5 requests. So he would have had him and 5 other people, which would be, a total of 6, Khabib-related fights on the card. So there's a few of them I think that are on there for the sake of them being on there. There are, we have a catchweight fight, unfortunately, a last-minute one. There's some fights, in my opinion, don't matter as much. So for me, my focus is going to be on the main card. But I do see that, and all the matchups on this, there's a couple slobber knockers and some pretty good fights as well. So I think I might skip the first couple fights. There's a men's lightweight fight and a women's flyweight fight. I'm interested in the catchweight fight onward. So I might be cracking a beer more like 11:30.
Okay, that's a little bit more acceptable, I guess, than 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't know how there will be somebody who is drinking from the get-go, someone who's living their best life on Abu Dhabi time, and that's another thing I was going to mention. Abu Dhabi is
It'll be Conor. Conor will be the one having a drink at 11 o'clock our time.
Yeah, a glass of proper whiskey. The standard time zone in Abu Dhabi is 1 hour ahead of Russia as well. So that's another, I guess, reason why they're holding it there. It's really interesting listening to DC talk about, I follow him on Twitter, so I see a couple of his videos, and listening to him talk about how he's got to readjust to the to the normal time zone of where they're at, because they were used to working on the Eastern time zone and used to being up till 4 and 5 in the morning. And so now he had to readjust. And so it's just interesting to get that information and that knowledge about what the fighters have actually been going through over there. It's so out of the norm. They're trying to fit into our schedule, and they're fighting at such late hours. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the American fighters, I guess is the point I'm getting at, who have been used to training and used to keeping one set of hours, as opposed to the Khabib camp, who has been used to fighting at these hours. Do you think that'll affect any of the fighters?
I do think so. I think a lot of the fighters that have got there kind of saw it's a little bit of UFC embedded. You saw people like Walt Harris and a few of the other fighters just kind of planning their travel, like how much they should sleep on the plane. I think most fighters of the average acclimation have to do at least 5 tests before the fights. Most fighters are getting there at least a week out. As far as sea level and the difference in like people's gas tank, it's not like you're going from Mexico City or sort of going from Denver to Vegas or Vegas to Denver, where you should be able to get acclimated pretty quickly. I say that having no idea what Fight Island's it's even going to be like, but what I do think is that sleep is something you can generally fix pretty quickly with a few hard workouts and a little bit of routine. I think by about day 2 or 3, you should be on that schedule. You got to keep in mind too, a lot of these fighters, they might train in Oregon, but they fight all the time in Vegas, or they train on the East Coast, but they fight on the West Coast. And I know that's only a 2 or 3 hour difference at times, but the same principles apply, right? And if you're fighting on the East Coast and you are the curtain jerker and you're the first fight on at 7 o'clock, and then, you take a short notice fight and you're on the main card on the West Coast, and you're not fighting until 11:30, all this stuff plays into it. I think the fighters, it's going to make a very small difference to those who aren't taking it seriously, or those who aren't disciplined. Like if you have people staying up and media obligations get in the way. But I think overall, it shouldn't be that much of an adjustment for any of the fighters, especially the fighters who've been doing this longer than others. So maybe some of the younger fighters will have a bit of difficulty with it.
Yeah, so the moral of the story is stay out of DC's room and stop losing money to him on NBA and UFC.
Can we just take a second here and talk about like Fight Island Daniel Cormier?
Oh my goodness,
you want to talk about a human being living his so we've seen in the last 4 days, we've seen him on someone else's phone wrestling with Hazmat Chimaev, and then with Khabib, literally just walking around wrestling people. You see him say hi to, Justin Gaethje's parents. He's done 2 media scrums in the last 5 days. He's done a BT Sports interview. He's winning money off other people playing video games. He's playing his portable PlayStation 4 or Xbox, whatever he has, all over the place. His room has become like the video game room. Has anyone else had an easier transition into retirement than Daniel Cormier?
Oh my goodness, he's like you said, he's living his best life, right? And he still remains ever the gentleman. Of all of that, all of everything you just mentioned, the biggest thing that stood out to me from what Daniel Cormier has done on Fight Island is he decided to sit out of the meetings with Justin Gaethje in respect of Justin and his game plan, because they know, everybody knows how close he is with Nurmagomedov and that camp, right? So as much as Daniel knows that he would never transfer that information, you don't want to have that seed of doubt in any fighter. So out of respect for Justin, he stayed out of that, and he said he would talk to Justin outside of it and get some answers for his line, or for his line of thought, right? And that to me is a respect thing, not just of fighters, but a professional respect, right?
Yeah, John, I completely agree. Fight Island DC is having fun, but also keeping it very professional. Like you saw, he is conducting a lot of these interviews or these game plan outside of the camps, on the phones, asking questions and taking a backseat to his insider stuff. What I love about DC is that he's a consummate professional. He's a great broadcaster. He knows when to have fun, and he's also a coach, so he knows when to stay focused. What I love about it is in retirement, we're seeing somebody who's been a little bit more candid and less worried about his future fighting opportunities, and more just doing the best thing he can for the sport. His comments about Anderson Silva never being one of the greatest of all time because he has a bad test, and the way he brought that in to talk about himself, as well as Khabib. Khabib has had absolutely no trouble with USADA, no scares, nothing even remotely close, himself included. Remember, Daniel Cormier has been in the USADA program in whatever carnation it was at the time, from the time that he was 18 and 19 years old all the way through his 40s, and never come close to even the most clean tests, and I think maybe USADA history. So, I love watching DC. He can't miss. When he's having fun, he's having the good kind of fun. When he's asking questions, he's asking the right kind of questions. He's one hell of a commentator. And he's like this. I don't know how to. He's like this sports. I don't know.
He's the next Tony Romo. He's the next Romo.
Yeah, Tony Romo. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I love seeing a DC, but if people watching have not seen Daniel Cormier's behind the scenes footage of Fight Island, He's the working mascot. He's the UFC mascot. He's in every hallway. At one point he's in 12 different behind the scenes Instagram stories on the same day with different fighters in different parts of the island. It's just so good. I love DC.
Yeah, he's just riding around on a scooter or a Vespa there. That's how he gets everywhere.
Always in his socks pulled up and his pants too high.
Could you just imagine
Love him.
that DC on a Vespa with those high socks? Just scooting
It's
around.
got to look better than his golf swing.
Yeah, probably. Okay. You talked about the main card of 254. There are 3 huge fights that headline it. We've got Khabib Gaethje, we've got Cannonier Whittaker, and Volkov Harris. A couple big boys getting at it to start off the final 3 fights. Which one of those 3 are you looking forward to the most?
It's hard. It's such a good card, and normally it would be difficult to decipher which is the most fascinating. But there's nothing on this planet more fascinating than Khabib Nurmagomedov. Even on just him alone, after the death of his father, having a full training camp, will his mindset change? Will fulfill his, people are kind of marketing it as his father's, legacy wish, his wish for him to be 30-0 and then retire. There's just so much intrigue about that. People were saying for a long time, even before the Tony Ferguson fight, Justin Gaethje posed the most problems for Khabib stylistically, and the fact that, and I'll touch on this once quickly, and then maybe we can circle back to it. But that matchup, hands down, is the most intriguing. We're blessed to have Cannonier and Whittaker, which is a very interesting matchup. And the Volkov Harris, another great match, a good, solid. Anytime you get 2 heavyweights on there with cardio, it's going to be a good fight. So I almost appreciate the UFC doing that. But I mean, the headliner could carry this card themselves.
Yeah, lots of headlines, lots of news when you talk about Khabib Gaethje. To me, I guess I'm most excited to see Cannonier and see how he performs against Robert Whittaker. And, he's been colored as a guy who has had a little bit of an easy path in the UFC. He has had a dominant path, but it hasn't been through a bunch of guys who have given him a hard time. So this will be a definite matchup where this is a measuring stick matchup. We know what Robert Whittaker is worth. We've heard Izzy talk. If Robert Whittaker wants to get knocked out for a 3rd time, then he's fine with it. But he has DM'd Cannonier. He's expecting Cannonier to challenge for the title. And this is the reason, I guess, why I'm so excited. We talked about it, I believe, on almost one of the first episodes of Puncher's Chance. Maybe even before we were calling it Puncher's Chance, we were talking about Cannonier and why not him. And now it is him. This is his chance. This is his shot. Do you see him getting past Robert Whittaker and getting to Izzy?
I don't. Actually, I'm one of the few people who I think that don't see it. There's 2 things. I want to go back to what you said about Izzy DMing Cannonier. Let's look at the law. Israel Adesanya is a very smart individual, and he likes the mental games. What if him doing that was a way to avoid fighting Cannonier? And I say that because Cannonier really poses the largest threat to Izzy, or at least that's the way Izzy sees it. Imagine saying, hey, man, just win your next fight. All you got in your next fight, man, you'll get a title shot, and you could be the champ. All you're got to do is beat Whittaker. I beat him. You got to beat him. You got it. You're putting added pressure on a number 1 contender fight. It's already going to be a pressure cooker because it's likely going to be for the number 1 contender. But then it's already guaranteed. You're already looking past the opponent in a way. So is Jared Cannonier going to lose focus? So what I said about Whittaker and Cannonier, I don't think Cannonier is going to get it done. I think Whittaker's been in there with the best. He's got exceptionally interesting movement. He's good from both stances, and he mixes in kicks and punches very, very well. Cannonier's biggest wins, right? Anderson Silva won that fight basically because Silva got injured. He wasn't necessarily winning that fight. It wasn't like it was a lopsided victory. And the fight against Jack Hermanson was a great, or Hermanson was a fantastic uppercut. But even when you watch it back in the replay, it was kind of a close your eyes and throw him. He's a powerful guy. He's a focused guy. bit of a strange cat when it comes to, like loving all these, like the energy crystals and shit. But I just think that Robert Whittaker is a born thrower of feet and hands. He's an actual scrapper. I think Cannonier is going to see things that he hasn't seen in there before. And I think that if Whittaker can get past guys like Jacare, guys like Romero twice, he's been in there against Darren Till, who has a much more intricate striking game than Cannonier does. I think it's just experience, a remotivated, faster, quicker, Robert Whittaker is just going to get it done. I think it's going to be a great fight nonetheless, but I don't see the Cannonier thing. I think he's just a little too stiff, he's not fluid enough. And I think when Robert Whittaker is at the best that he can be, he's one of the hardest people to beat.
So I find it interesting, and you speak about the DMs and how it might have affected Cannonier to possibly look beyond his opponent. I think I go and I take the mentality of Robert Whittaker. And what does Robert Whittaker think about those DMs? And maybe he's like, okay, yeah, Izzy, you can talk like that. You beat me, you knocked me out, whatnot. But I'm sure as shit not going to let some punk ass kid who hasn't done anything, who hasn't earned anything, believe in those DMs. And I'm going to prove a point. Do you think those DMs might add a little bit of an extra fire to Robert Whittaker?
To be honest, or that's the other thing. I don't know the game that Izzy's playing, but if it's to psych out Robert Whittaker, it might be working. But what you don't want to motivate Robert Whittaker. Or maybe you do. Maybe he thinks he has Whittaker's number. And if he messes with Cannonier and he knows it'll set off Whittaker, that it might cause a reaction that would be favorable for Izzy. I don't think Robert Whittaker is the kind of guy to really engage in all that stuff. You don't see him getting in firefights. He seems to be really narrow-minded, actually, when it comes to his training and what his game plans are. In the past, he's talked about really not having a game plan and just focusing on what he does and what he does well. And his demeanor, it seems like something like that would get to Cannonier, but it wouldn't get to Whittaker. So either way, Izzy's a genius. But I think that there's a pressure on Jared Cannonier that he's not used to. And he's also had the longer of the two layoffs. Whittaker just came out of a 5-round beautiful fight with Darren Till, who is super high level. And we talk about the level of competition that Cannonier's faced, nowhere close to Whittaker, and he hasn't been active enough. I think you're going to both those things. And then, the travel, the Fight Island aspect, the fact there won't be any fans in there. I think you're just going to see it all be too much too soon with not enough activity for Jared Cannonier. So let me write that down as a 3-round decision for Robert Whittaker.
Oh, and we have a prediction as well. So 3-round decision for Robert Whittaker over Jared Cannonier. And you said Whittaker will be throwing stuff at him that Cannonier has never seen. I mean, Whittaker's from New Zealand and lives in Australia. Anyone who lives around those bugs that they have out there, I don't want to have anything to do with them in the octagon, because they're willingly living in the pits of hell with demons and beasts that don't belong on this planet. So I don't want to be fighting them either.
Yeah. Listen, like Jared Cannonier is got it all. He's got power. He looks fast at middleweight, right? He's 13-4. He's from Alaska, but I believe he fights out of Arizona now. I have a hard time keeping track of people where they're training these days, if it's not on the videos anymore. Before, you used to be able to see it on their websites, but everything's just a different place right now. I believe he is out of the MMA lab, which is in Arizona. MMA lab, you're talking about, it's John Crouch's gym. So you've got everybody from Benson Henderson to Rick Story fought out of there for a long time. I almost want to say that Sean O'Malley would have came out of there as well, I believe. Definitely. He's an Arizona boy. So there's a lot of good talent in that gym. They're great at game planning. And I think that he'll have a good idea of what to do, or maybe he has an idea in his head at least how to beat Whittaker. But again, I think that you're looking at a high-level striker with more experience. He's in there. He's seen more. He's done more. He's been the champ. He knows what it's like to be there and to have fallen, and he's already on the rise again, right? You saw him have that turnaround performance against Darren Till. I think the sky is the limit for Robert Whittaker. I think he's going to be one of those guys that just kind of hangs around the number one, number two slot for a very, very, very long time. And I definitely think he gets it done against Cannonier.
Yeah, I've referred to him as the sub boss to the boss before, and maybe he does have it in him to beat Izzy, but he'll have to pull off Brian Ortega level change in order to beat the style bender. I feel, if Whittaker does get beyond Cannonier, then you have to start talking about a rematch with Adesanya, and
Yeah.
if and when that
Yeah.
happens, we don't know when that'll happen. To be sometime late in 2021. And definitely not the fight I think that the UFC is looking for. Not that they're looking for a Cannonier Adesanya fight, because that doesn't really, it's not as sexy. But I think that impossibly in the UFC's eyes as well, Robert Whittaker might be past his shelf life in a title fight against Adesanya, not against anybody else. But you don't want to see just an instant repeat of the last fight, right? You want to see something different. You want to see somebody evolve.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that we're seeing that in Whittaker a little bit. But I mean, Cannonier is going to have to put on like a show-stopping performance, because I don't know. I just don't. Every time I close my eyes and picture this fight, I just don't see a way other than a knockout. And again, everyone's hyping up Cannonier's power, but like we're talking about fucking Bobby Knuckles, right? Robert fucking Whittaker. Like the guy has done inhuman things to really, really tough people for a very long time. And I just think, experience and skill over brute power.
All right, moving on to the main event. Lots to talk about this one. Lots to talk about on both sides. Most interesting to me, he's done it twice. He did it when he won the interim title, and now he did it again in the pre-fight news conference or press conferences. Justin Gaethje wants nothing to do with that interim title, eh?
I love this. I got to tell you, like, I know people have said things like, I can't wait to get my hands on the real one, or Brock Lesnar's famous like that belt's fake, or you have the fake belt, and like shit on other people's achievements. What we've never seen before is somebody with that self-deprecating angle, where Justin Gaethje, there's no everyone's. I've already seen some Twitter chatter of people being like, well, he's fucking wearing it in the pictures and all that other stuff. Listen to me. There are media obligations and photos being taken of Justin Gaethje with a belt, because he is the interim champion. When you see two champions holding their belts, there's more intrigue just on a peripheral level, just by looking at it. Oh, cool. Those two must be two of the best in the world. Let's tune in. Also, if Justin Gaethje does defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov, immediately you're going to see graphics on the UFC pay-per-view that have Justin Gaethje holding the fucking belt. So you need to have those things ahead of time. There's fighters who have tried to get out of this in the past. They say it jinxes them, that they don't want to touch the belt. So they have a fake belt that looks like, but then you get your actual real belt if you win. So there is media going around where he is holding that belt, but it is not the real legitimate. The belt that he owns says interim on it. The UFC sends it to your house, whether you want it or not. Whether you drop it in a dumpster or whether you drop it in the middle of the ring after you win it, it doesn't matter. But I do think that the consistency of this action is important. So I'm all into it. I love that he was looking around being like, who do I give this fucking belt to? He would have been told to take his few pictures with it. And then it was almost like he had like have you ever held $10,000 in your hand?
No, I haven't. But
all right, so imagine holding $10,000 in your hand, and all of a sudden you walk into a room full of people, and all you can think to yourself is like, I gotta fucking get rid of this money. Someone's going to knife me for this. It's like, it's too valuable. It's kind of the same reaction, but he doesn't want it. He's like, you know what? I cool, photo's done. And I thought that even the little interaction they have, right, where Khabib thinks that it's time to throw his belts, like to take a picture without any belts, and then realizes that no, Justin Gaethje just gave his belt away, and they're like, no, Khabib, keep taking with pictures. And he's like, okay, because even he didn't realize that Justin Gaethje was so committed to doing that he has not won the championship, even though he will go down as a UFC champion the same way. And he said something about, and Dustin Poirier and him have been going back a little bit on this, back and forth a little bit. He said that it was Dustin's dream, and once he got that championship, he had made it, which is one of the reasons that he lost to Khabib. Justin Gaethje has said, like, I haven't won shit. And that mentality, I think, is going to go, man, most of this fight is going to be mental anyways. Your mental strength, right? Mental exhaustion. And I think that his mindset and is totally in the right place if he's doing stuff like that, man. I love it. The more he disregards the interim championship belt, the more I'm like, I'm 100% on the Gaethje train.
Yeah, I think it endeared him a little bit to Khabib as well. I've heard
Yeah.
Khabib speak about how he respects that about him, how he isn't running around and flaunting as if he's the champion when he knows there is someone else above him that holds the real belt. So a little bit of respect there earned from the guy that you're going to be facing off against in the octagon. Before this fight was going to take place, everyone was looking forward to Khabib versus Tony. Now we know what Khabib thinks about Tony and how he doesn't think he's going to get there. But what if Khabib loses? Do we then finally see that matchup, or do we automatically see a rematch for the belt with Gaethje?
If there was ever a master plan where you have the lightweight division, which is, I guess, going on 5 or 6 years now, been the most exciting, most stacked division you've had, probably maybe even since Frankie Edgar won and the WBC guys came over. When Frankie Edgar was champion, it's just been a crazy exciting division, and it gets thicker and thicker with talent. Ideally, if Conor had just been able to keep his temper in track, on track, it would have been really, really interesting to see how the Tony Ferguson thing. I think he is destined to fight Khabib. I think everybody still has to see that fight. I think it's one of those things where, kind of like Nick Diaz when he fought GSP coming off a loss, it didn't matter because you just had to see that fight. But I say that with a grain of salt, because in a perfect world, you have Khabib win and then fight Tony Ferguson, but they can't seem to get Tony Ferguson a fight. So there's a problem there. Tony Ferguson should have fought Dustin Poirier, who was coming off a win, likely fight of the year candidate, up there with Joanna and Weili Zhang. Right? Poirier versus Ferguson, which would have been an absolute fight of the year candidate again. And the winner of that would have had Poirier rematch Khabib, or I think Tony would have pulled that fight out. And you ultimately see Tony fight that, regardless of the Gaethje loss. And then you have the fight that you've always wanted. And then maybe after that, you line up Gaethje and Conor, or you line up whoever's coming else, whoever else is coming through lightweight at the time. And you have Conor as kind of like this third man out, but like this, the odd man out kind of thing. And he's always lingering there. Conor gets a win, and then Khabib beats Tony, right? And then you have Khabib Conor too. And you can see these pathways or all these possibilities. The Conor Poirier thing, I think, is a great fight because I just want to watch Conor do his thing, man. He's in his 30s now. He's got to fight. I want to see him fight 2-3 times a year. So I'm jonesing at that. But I think that it kind of threw a wrench into things. Personally, I'll get the prediction out of the way. I do think Gaethje pulls this off. I'll get into stylistically. I'll spend a few minutes talking about that in a second. I've broken this down like I've almost written an essay on it. But I think he gets it done. But then all of a sudden, there's a whole lineup of fresh blood for Justin Gaethje, people that he hasn't fought yet, right? Then you have no other choice. Who's Gaethje beaten? He lost to Poirier. He beat Ferguson, right? There's all these interesting matchups, but the first person you put him against is going to be Conor. So no, I think Conor McGregor gets the winner of this fight, and I think you will not see a Poirier-Conor announcement until after this fight. If it ends up being the fight of the year, razor thin split decision for Khabib, they'll rematch. Razor thin split decision for Gaethje, they rematch because it'll just be a good fight, right? Or Khabib vacates and you still do Conor and whoever else, right? It's lightweight is crazy. So I do think Gaethje gets it done, but I think the winner, I think you're actually looking at Conor McGregor's next fight, whoever wins this one.
Man, I think the only way you ever see Khabib McGregor 2 is if McGregor's holding the belt and Khabib can't stand that and he wants it back. and he can't stand the fact that McGregor has it, and that's the only way he is ever going to fight Conor. So if we're putting Conor in a match with Justin Gaethje, and that's our path to Khabib McGregor 2, then I'm down for it. Other than that, I just don't know. I want to see Khabib fight as long as humanly possible, so I can't agree with seeing his 30-0 plan, because if he gets 30-0, then that's all said and done. It's over with, right? I think that if he gets that loss,
and no,
then he will fight again. Yeah, I don't know where we're gonna go with it. I would love to see Conor versus Poirier. I'd love to see Conor fight for the strap, but I think he needs a couple wins under his belt aside from Cowboy Cerrone before you can legitimately say Conor McGregor deserves another title shot.
Right. If this was a perfect world, then Conor McGregor wasn't Conor McGregor, although I do like the fact that Conor McGregor lives in this world, and I consider that perfect. You have, in order of lightweight division, you have Khabib, the champion, but then it goes Gaethje, Poirier, Ferguson, Conor. And then fifth is Dan Hooker. So you got Gaethje and Khabib. That makes sense. 2 and 3 should fight. That's Tony Ferguson coming off of a 12-fight win streak, losing to Gaethje. Put him against Poirier, who lost against Khabib but beat Dan Hooker. Conor, technically, if he wasn't Conor McGregor, would be fighting Dan Hooker. That's the fight that would happen. Or Conor did beat Cowboy, so maybe you do stick him with Poirier, and that's what makes sense. But what do you do with Tony Ferguson? Maybe Tony Ferguson gets the loser of this fight. Maybe he gets the winner of this fight. But unfortunately, Tony Ferguson lives in the time of Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor is fighting for the UFC in a time of where business matters more than just actually putting on the right people versus the right people. Right? If Conor decided tomorrow that it was going to be him versus Masvidal, people would watch that. If he fought Colby Covington, people would watch that. He's the man with options. He's the man that people want to see. And that's just the reality of the situation. The more the fighters bitch about it, the more I think they're not living in reality. But truth is, I think this whole thing's going to get evened out. I think that everybody here, when you look at it, the only person who isn't coming off a win is Tony Ferguson. So maybe Tony Ferguson is the one who should be fighting Dan Hooker. Two guys who just lost to the top of the division. Conor beat Cerrone, right? He's still pretty relevant. He lost his last fight lightweight division, but it's against the champ. So he has a win under his belt kind of thing. So no matter how you play it, the UFC wins. But at the end of the day, I have a sneaky suspicion that this fight is going to be great, and we may see it more than once. Khabib's plan is beat Gaethje, fight George St. Pierre, and retire. That's fine, but that's closing the book on his first chapter. Khabib, as far as I know, is what, 32, 31?
He's really
I can look it up quickly. I'm pretty, yeah. He could take a few years off, spend some time with his family, and if Conor does win the belt, he comes back. He's 32. He comes back, right? And then fights Conor out of nowhere. Like, that's incredible. Khabib will have the ability to come back anytime between this year and before he probably turns 36, right? That's going to be his prime athletic, I think it's absolute athletic prime. So he could leave for a year or so, and no one loves a comeback more than any human being ever. It's everyone's favorite story. So again, this thing is like an onion, man. There's 1,000 different layers. There's the reason why this fight is so interesting. And I love the criticism. I love the fact that there's so many eyes on it. I apparently, according to Dana White, it is trending like crazy, but there's so many more reasons than just, Khabib Gaethje. There's so many different layers. So many things come out of this. The ripple effect this fight is going to have. I'm frothing at the mouth. And for that reason and that reason alone, I'm glad it comes earlier than later on Saturday, my man.
I need to see how Khabib holds himself when he loses. We've only ever seen him through victory, and I want to see if he has the dignity that he holds himself with through victory. If he has that, dignity except for within the Conor McGregor fight, that we can't call the after that one having any dignity, but there was none in that fight at all on either side. So I just need to see how he holds himself through a loss, right? So I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to it. I'm hoping Justin Gaethje wins. He's got the power to do it, but Khabib is fantastic on the ground, and whenever he has been threatened on the feet, like Conor threatened him on the feet, if that fight stayed standing up, then you could have seen McGregor winning that one easily. But the fact that Khabib could take it to the mat whenever he wanted, that's his world. He can control it, and there's nothing you can do about it. That to me makes me wonder: are we going to see a boring fight where Khabib just dominates him on the mat the whole time?
I would have liked to have seen the Conor McGregor that beat Eddie Alvarez against the Khabib that beat Conor. I do think you looked at he didn't even look like he was in that great of shape. I mean, he's physically, he looks great, but I mean, the thing is, that was the sloppiest Conor I've ever seen inside the octagon. And I want that to be ran back like you wouldn't believe. And I do think it'll happen. I think that Khabib holds the cards. I think he likes it, but I think he loses this fight. He probably fights Conor almost right away. I think they scratch the Poirier fight if he loses. Gaethje fights, rematches Poirier for all I know. Who knows? Enough predictions for me. I do want to talk. This is one of my first forays kind of into understanding wrestling. When I was in high school, wrestling was a huge deal. EC Jury had a great wrestling program in Milton, and a lot of them went off to complete collegiately. A few of them ended up opening up MMA gyms and stuff like that. So I'm able to kind of canvas some people, and although I should be focused on other things like other papers I should be writing, I dove into this thing pretty hard. This is why everyone thinks I'm crazy, and you might agree with them. I think Gaethje gets it done one of two ways. First of all, I think he can knock Khabib out. I think that he has very elusive and tricky hands, and their angles, and the way he throws punches is so unconventional that most conventional boxers or people who are training stand up in a conventional style, there's small nuances that lead to huge differences. Even if you look at the fights that he's lost, right? The Gaethje, like when Gaethje lost to Poirier, you know what the funny thing was about that? He was winning that fight until he was losing it. Like he basically gives the fight up. He loses to himself. And once he corrected that, you watched a masterpiece like Ortega. Ortega changed his whole style. His best still yet to come. I think that the time is right, and there's enough tape on Khabib now to have a good game plan. I went back and started looking at Justin Gaethje's overall, why he was one of the best wrestlers at his time, and he has wins over a guy, knocked the teeth out of people who are the best wrestlers in the world right now. So to say that he doesn't wrestle would be ridiculous. There's two different kinds of wrestlers, and this is how I've broken it down for you. Defensive wrestling or counter-offensive wrestling, however you want to refer to it, is very important in high-level competition. So the strategy for defensive wrestling applies to all wrestlers and all athletes, but there was maybe John Smith, who was a 6-time world champion, or Sechev was a 9-time world champion. They're extraordinary competitors with total offensive styles, but every single wrestler has to understand defense. Very few people, right? So let's take Sechev, who was an extraordinary Olympian. He lost to a guy named Brandon Slay of the U.S. in the 2000 Olympics because Brandon Slay had a defensive wrestling strategy. In international competition on the open level, this strategy has notoriously been studied and mastered by North Americans, and not a lot of time is spent from the Europeans adapting their style to it. Khabib, all offense all the time. But there are nuances and strategies in defensive wrestling that are so important, and I think this is what's going to happen. So I'm going to break this down for you, Lodge, because I had a hard time getting my head around it as well. So if we have people who are listening to this and I end up, striking oil with this amazing, investigation, at least I've done my homework for once.
Get your
So imagine wrestling. That's right. Here we go. This is where the puncher's chance breaks out of its shell and becomes internationally famous for my wrestling breakdowns, even though I've only wrestled twice in my life and I got my ass whipped both times. Okay, so imagine wrestler one spends 80%, or we'll just use men's wrestling for this point because this is what I studied. No offense to women or anywhere. It's equally as competitive, and I love all women's sports. Wrestler number one, 80% of his time on offense wrestling, maybe 20% of his time is spent on defensive wrestling. This is North American. It's even less when you take on Russian, Dagestani, European wrestling styles, right? he or she, well, he works on about 50 different takedowns offensively, and then your normal sprawl, stance, reshot, which is what you see Khabib. He's a reshooter. He will shoot on you 100 times. Offensively, there are so many attacks on your feet and setups that it takes years to master these and to perfect them because there's so many different ones. It's 80% of your arsenal, and that arsenal is wide. Imagine trying to fire, being decent at firing every gun in the world, whereas Wrestler 2 spends 80% of his time on counter-offensive or defensive wrestling and less than 20% of his time on true offensive wrestling. He focuses training on defending the shot and then how to counter the offensive. He spends his time on his stance, his sprawl, and all the other elements of defense, which are not as hard to grasp as the offensive positions because there are so few. There's only a handful of ways you can stop a takedown. Imagine being the best at stopping takedowns. Your offense is barely 20% of your focus, right? You're not thinking about high crotches and doubles and singles and snap and spin, right? These are the same moves that Wrestler 2 will use against Wrestler 1. He will use counter-offensive wrestling. Justin, the highlight Gaethje, built his unbelievably impressive collegiate and high school wrestling career being the best defensive wrestler that he could be. He's not worried about how to stop a takedown or how to not get taken down. He is like, you might as well come for me because I am an expert on knowing what you're about to do and how I can stop it. The only problem is there's a cage. So if Justin Gaethje can use his angles and use his footwork to stay off the cage, throw his heavy hands, and use will be on the same level as Khabib is on defensive wrestling. So Khabib is number one offensive hold you down grappler. Well, Justin Gaethje is the number one at not getting taken down. So that's how he wins this. The elements of defensive wrestling are so much easier to master than the offensive elements, which, John, I didn't know. So what if wrestler number 1 and wrestler number 2 are even when it comes to speed and balance and strength and weight and all that stuff? If they both start wrestling tomorrow and prepare to compete against each other in 6 months, who will win? To be fair, let's say wrestler 1 is going to focus on 20 moves on his feet. Wrestler 2 has built his defense and focuses reshots on the same techniques. He's mastering 1 or 2. One ends up being a master, the other one ends up being a jack of all trades. And that is why Justin Gaethje, with his power, his more intricate hands, and his lifetime of defensive wrestling, gets this job done.
You heard it here first. Justin Gaethje with the victory over Khabib, and he will out-wrestle Khabib while he's at it. Well, out-defensive wrestle Khabib. Maybe he'll make Khabib not want to go to the ground. Who knows? Because he'll have, there is plenty of tape on Justin Gaethje's defensive wrestling. So if he knows that he's not going to be able to be as successful as he was previously in matches against Ally Quinta and Conor McGregor and et cetera, maybe he will try to change his style, and that could also end up being Khabib's downfall, trying to change what has been successful. There are so many things that you could think of and want to talk about when it comes to these fights, but all we know is that it's going to happen. The main card starts 2 p.m. on Saturday. Now, you said it's going to be Whittaker. You said it's going to be Gaethje. Finish off the top 3 fights. Make me a parlay here. You don't need to get into in depth, but Volkov or Harris, who is on your ticket?
For some reason, I don't like Alexander Volkov, and I don't know why. But for some reason, I also love Walt Harris. I love his story. I love that he had the world on his shoulders, and he almost beat Alistair Overeem. I think Walt Harris is back to having fun. Life isn't as serious as it was, and there wasn't all that pressure on him. I think Walt Harris is going to be your pick. He's already an athletic guy who can throw hands. You saw what happened with Alexander Volkov with an unathletic guy who can throw hands, and Derek Lewis knocked him out pretty well. I'm going to take Harris as a live dog. Rounding out the main card, I love me some Philip Hawes. It's a great middleweight fight, but I think Philip Hawes got that all day. I like Lauren Murphy. She's taking she's supposed to fight Claudia. Oh my
Lilia
goodness.
Shakarova is what I have here.
Yeah, it's a last minute replacement.
Okay.
Cavillo, thank you. Cynthia Cavillo she was supposed to fight her, and then COVID hit, so that's not going to happen there. Yeah, and then you got Magomed Ankalev versus Ion Kutalaba, light heavyweights. I got Magomed on that one. So up on the top card, I'll take Magomed, I'll take Lauren Murphy, I'll take Philip Haas. I will take Walt Harris as the underdog. I'm taking Whittaker, and I'm taking Gaethje. And so you've got 3 underdogs, although Whittaker and Cannonier are kind of basically are 1-1 there. I've got 3 out of 5 fights there as the unders taking over. So, there's a nice parlay for you right there, buddy.
Seen a lot of live dogs win their fights in the last few weeks in the UFC, so you can never underestimate the underdog. All right, we got we've talked a lot about Conor McGregor. We haven't talked about the upcoming fight, and you've said it hasn't yet been signed. There is no official contract. They've agreed on a date. They've agreed to the fight, but no pen to paper yet. So maybe there is some sort of suspicion about it. But the one thing that Conor McGregor has pushed for, he said that he wants to fight in Jerry World, and now as an added bonus, Jordan, they have said that they can host a 50% capacity
50%.
which holds 100,000 people. So that the largest UFC event, 60,000
Yep.
people, I believe, was in Australia or New Zealand. And this would be the second largest event because you're getting 50,000 people in there. So is it possible? And is it even more possible if there's a possible number 1 contender or title on the line?
Yeah, to be honest, Wade had the right response. Let's not talk about fans yet. My God, my friend, how do you distribute the 50%? Are they every other seat? Are you doing it, one full section, and then you leave? If you guys haven't seen ATT, the stadium is basically floor, let's call them hundreds, 200s, 300s, 400s, nosebleeds, right? The thing holds 80,000 people, can be expanded up to 100,000 people when standing room only areas are included, right? So you're looking at likely, even to keep it safe, let's say you can only have 40,000 fans, 10,000, whatever, staff and extra space and whatever else you think of. Do you put fans on the floor? How do you light the thing? How do you decide who's going to get tickets? How many of them are friends and family? What's the price? Is Jerry Jones going to be like, please God, just have anyone in here? Is he going to charge an arm and a leg because of the supply and demand? Again, I think that Conor was pushing that because of Dana White's comments about, losing on a Conor McGregor gate. I think he was throwing it out there. First of all, it's virtue signaling. Let's not get it wrong. Playing into the fans is going to be a very smart move, especially when you're losing fans is some of the shit that you do every single day, even though I love that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see it. That's the sad thing. I think you're going to see Conor likely Fight Island. I don't even think you bring him to Vegas. I think you keep the European fighters in that area. You've had success with Fight Island. You have a great relationship with Abu Dhabi. Every single fighter and every press member are saying how incredible it is. I think it's become like that new thing that you want to do as a fighter. For a long time, we had it here in Canada. Everybody wanted to fight in Toronto because the fans were going crazy. I think Fight Island has become a thing of interest, something that people want on their resume. And I think that with this historic push in this historic time, nothing's going to be able to top on that. When you look at the old Wikipedia page 10 years from now, there should be a Conor McGregor fight on there. I think you're going to see them likely add a date there on the 23rd. I think it's going to be in Abu Dhabi. I got a feeling, I just don't see you bringing them stateside for that.
Well, I know that the NFL has had some fans up to 11 and 15, sometimes even 20,000 fans in the building, and they've figured out how to socially distance them to a degree. I know that concerts had floated the idea of selling tickets in pods so that you get with people that are in your circle, and that's how you socially distanced. And I know that people in America just don't give a fuck. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that it's going to happen, Jordan. I think that in a
Yeah.
capitalist world, they're going to make this thing happen. There's enough appetite for it. If you can get the government, you can get the owner of the building, you can get the company to all in line to want fans and allow that amount of fans to go through. It's going to happen, so long as the outbreak doesn't get too
Yeah.
intense, right? If we're talking if we're talking this is going to happen in January, and we get to January and COVID hasn't slowed down, but it has increased, and we're terrified of it once again, to a point of not leaving our houses, then yeah, you're not getting 50,000 fans in an arena. But
I just don't know how you break it up. I don't know how you do, like, even if you're gonna do a half full venue, are people allowed to stand beside each other? Are people allowed to how do you get a drink? How do you even when I saw the KC fans, like, they're pretty dispersed over the entire area, right? It kind of still looks like it's empty. I don't know. It's so interesting, man. I think that out of all places, and I think we talked about this offline, I think one of those places that it's super conducive to there is no bad seat in the house because of those giant screens. So, I mean, you wouldn't have a bad seat, and it would be a cool experience. And like, I want it to happen. Just trying to be realistic, yeah, I'd like to see I'd like to see football have full stadiums again wherever they could. But I don't know if Conor's going to be the guy to bring it back. Maybe Conor. Maybe Conor Khabib too brings it around, but something I think you just see something that's going to be an absolute event. Not just another Conor McGregor fight. I think you'd have to have one of those all stakes kind of fights. So if you see Conor fighting for the title, maybe you roll the dice a little bit, but the liability of that is just so big.
I don't think you see Conor Khabib 2 until they can sell out a football arena. So
Agreed.
that fight, just plain and simple, isn't going to happen. And personally, when you say Conor Khabib 2 and we talk about selling it a whole arena, I know this makes absolutely no sense, and I'm going completely off of the script right now. But
Okay.
when I close my eyes, I say Conor McGregor versus Khabib 2. For some reason, I picture them inside the Roman Coliseum. Let's put an octagon in there.
I swear to God, I love the way you're thinking about this. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that what they've done with Fight Island, and again, I think Fight Island is going to have one of those ripple effect things. I think it's evolved into just this enigma of sorts. And I think what you're going to see, John, I agree with you. You're going to see, if we can do it in Abu Dhabi, we can do it other places. Why not? Why not just do? I know that the UFC likes to play the cards, pretty close to the chest, and there's money to be made in Vegas. They have long time business ties there. Taxes are low. Just the whole setup there. It should be the fight capital of the world with the way that the whole thing's set up. But I love the idea that this could lend itself to like different, fight coliseum, fight arena. Who knows? It's a good branding thing, and I don't think we'll see it all the time. But man, for those big events, why not?
I don't have a lot else on the script to talk about this week. Conor McGregor posting stupid videos on Twitter. That's the last thing I got about Conor. He
Yeah.
posted the video of the illegal knee strike. He said he shattered Khabib's eye with the knee. You heard Joe Rogan on the call. If you remember back, that was an illegal knee by Conor. Conor saying it should have been illegal, and he was using the wrestling as a push off to get to land the knee.
Yeah.
This all just speaks to the stuff that you've talked about before, the bad taste that McGregor leaves in people's mouths. He can't not be the topic of conversation. He knows where we're at. He knows we're 2 days away from possibly the biggest fight that the UFC has had all year, including his own in January, and he needs to be in the topic of conversation, and this is his way of doing it, right?
Yeah, this is the attention I don't like. I don't like when Conor, I call it reaching, when he's reaching out to try and sort of stir up the pot and take away from Habib's moment. I didn't like when he did it for the Nunes fight either, when John Jones does it too. It's shitty timing. You kind of get really, really excited and I don't know, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I think that what I like about the idea of this weekend and you can, again, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, brother, but I actually am enjoying the fact that there is very little drama, that there seems to be a natural intensity between the athletes who just want to compete. Habib, I don't need drama when it's Habib and Gaethje, because the fight itself and the fact that they're such, intense competitors, and it's kind of like the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. There's all these different things. Gaethje being like a human punching bag, but being like the most exciting guy that we've seen in the octagon in forever, yet somehow becomes this refined, tamed, ruthless, violent, the perfect fighter, the most dominant versus the most violent. All that stuff sells itself, man. To be honest, I love a lot of Conor's bullshit, but for me, this time around, I'd rather just not. I'd rather not have that for anything. I'd rather just watch these guys compete and watch the ferocity that comes out of their natural talent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We've had a lot of days of our lives, soap opera drama going on in the UFC recently, and it's almost been too much of it between the lead up to the Izzy fight to after with Izzy and Bones and everything else in between. It's just almost become too much, and so I agree with you. I'm enjoying the fact that it's been quiet on that side, on the drama side, right? I think that Habib. It's funny that you bring up the Undertaker, because the Undertaker, for a majority of his career, was the quiet guy, didn't have to say anything, walked tall, carried a big stick, and you never screwed with him.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's Habib almost, isn't it? Walk tall, carry a big stick, keep your composure, and he hasn't really wavered from that. So it's funny that that you bring up the Undertaker in reference to what to the
Yeah.
his longevity. I draw more reference other than the longevity to Habib in my opinion. So it's really interesting that you
Yeah,
bring up the
that's great.
Undertaker.
No, and you're 100% right. They have that similar stoicism of how they're able to, again, like, be feared and respected at the same time without saying too much. To keep up with our trend, though, dude, I got some breaking news here.
Always.
We were going to touch on it before. Leon Edwards has been removed from the UFC rankings. We did talk about that. We took a deep dive into this card, and rightfully so. I'm getting an update here that Leon Edwards says, and I quote, "I'm still in the rankings. Fuck all the activity. The only reason I haven't fought is because all these so-called top guys have turned me down. So Hazmat, you want to fight then?" Hazmat got back to him 5 minutes ago. It looks like probably more than an hour ago. He says, "I'm in. I'm always ready to fight. Let's go." Hazmat Chimaev, if he fights Leon Edwards, if that's his next fight, he has leapfrogged an entire division, because I'm on the train with Leon Edwards deserved the next title shot. He deserved it a year ago. He's been waiting in the wings, passed over because of visa issues, passed over because of COVID, passed over for a million injuries, whatever the fuck else. If he can't get a fight, or maybe that's what it was. Maybe they were offering him Hazmat, offering him Chimaev, and he kept on turning it down. So the UFC's like playing a hard hand, which they've done before. They did to Nate Diaz. When Nate Diaz was having problems negotiating his contract in his next fight, they pulled him from the rankings and just putting him back in. I'm telling you, Chimaev gets a Leon Roberts fight, sorry. Not only does he win that fight, you're looking at a guy who's going to go from being unranked to basically be the number one contender at 170. Huge. If they make that fight.
I'm glad we didn't talk about it till now, so you got the breaking news. We've been wondering who Chimaev's next opponent was going to be, and I know it was only fooling around, but seeing him be able to handle his own wrestling, DC, it just shows you exactly what this man can, or the potential that this man has. So if this was the UFC's way of playing a hard hand and forcing him into a fight that maybe he didn't want to take, I don't care, because I've been wanting to see Chimaev versus somebody who stands a chance, who can maybe push back, and let's see a little bit of competitiveness in these fights. It's all well and good to see someone dominate after dominate after dominate after dominate, but eventually you get bored of it and you want to see somebody be able to do something with the guy, and maybe it's Leon.
Yep. Leon Edwards was number 3 ranked in the world. He's been taken off the UFC ranking. So right now the rankings say Usman is champion, Covington number 1, Gilbert Burns number 2, where you had Leon Roberts before was number 3. Now that's Jorge Masvidal. Number 4 is Stephen Thompson. So you can see where it doesn't make sense. Hazmat would jump over Robbie Lawler, Anthony Pettis, Nate Diaz, Dos Anjos, Jeff Neal, Vincent DeLuque, Neil Magny, Michael Chiesa, Tyron Woodley, Damian Maia, Stephen Thompson, Jorge Masvidal. Yeah, and Jorge Masvidal. If he got that Leon Roberts fight, man, that's crazy. Like I've been saying for a long time, like Leon Edwards, it's Edwards. I don't know why I keep saying Roberts. Leon Edwards has deserved to fight Colby Masvidal, especially after Masvidal, they got into that backstage brawl. There's a lot of heat around that fight. He's not been able to get a fight. He's on an absolute tear, and it's been borderline tragic that he hasn't been able to get a fight. If Chimaev, man, if they pull this through, first of all, it's a great booking, and there's already a lot of chatter. I'm watching, up to an hour and a half to 2 hours ago, just reports Leon Edwards turning down multiple opponents, including Jeff Neal, Colby Covington. So that's why they pulled him, because you don't say no to the UFC, especially when you're a high-ranking guy. Yeah. So if Chimaev gets that fight, the UFC has been known to kind of punish people by putting them in the ring with guys that are scary. And my man, if they pull this together, I mean, the folklore and the legend that is Hazmat Chimaev is full and is on full tilt here. You're looking at a guy, he's literally coming off an 8-fight win streak is Leon Edwards, right? He beat Gunnar Nelson, Donald Cerrone, Vicente Luque, Rafael Dos Anjos. He's won all these fights. His last loss was to Kamaru Usman, and it was a unanimous decision. So he's been on an absolute tear since.
You can't blame anyone for losing to Usman, right? Either after seeing what he's been able to do in the octagon, yeah. He's a tough guy to go up against on any day of the week, no matter who you are. Mm-hmm. So if Hazmat ends up beating Edwards, and I am not for a second looking beyond Leon Edwards. The next fight for me, and I'm not putting him in the title picture, the next fight for me has to be Masvidal, doesn't it? Because he was the guy who was most recently in the title picture, and that's what I want to see.
Yeah. I was having a long conversation with one of the people that I know that just loves Jorge Masvidal, and to be honest, has loved him for a long time, even before his superstardom. And what I found interesting was that, Jorge Masvidal went on this tear, and then got the BMF belt, and then kind of sat on the back burner for a little, probably too long. And I agree with Usman when he was saying that maybe Masvidal is drinking his own Kool-Aid a little bit, but he's still one of the most skilled guys out there. But what you do right now with Jorge Masvidal, I think is going to be a make or break as far as how you maintain his level of superstardom. You saw it with Cowboy Cerrone. When Cowboy was fighting every 2 or 3 weeks and racking up wins, he was on fire. He switches divisions when he loses a title shot. Switches divisions, goes on a bit of a tear, right? And he was at this, he reaches this peak of like, oh my God. And then you need those few things that push you over, and then you just maintain that level of superstardom forever. Like you see with John Jones, right? He had his moments. He'll be John Jones forever. You etch his name. Same with Anderson Silva. They've had those moments. Jorge Masvidal reached his fever pitch and then saved that Fight Island card with Usman. Didn't have a great performance, but we don't blame him. But the next thing he does has got to be big, and he's got to win. So I think you play it very, very careful with Jorge Masvidal. I think you get him the Nate Diaz rematch, or you give him a big fight. And I think that, I don't see what else you do with him at this point. That he's too big to be kept in the back burner. But they're also doing it to Conor. So I don't know. It's a bit of a mess, but Jorge Masvidal needs a big fight and a big W.
Maybe that's Chimaev, who knows? And you don't want to ever.
Could you imagine?
Stunt Shamaev, but that would be the fight for me. If he gets by Edwards, the fight for me it has to be Masvidal versus Shamaev because of where Masvidal was so recently in the title picture of facing Usman. You got to go through the guy like Cannonier's got to go through Whittaker.
I think that Jorge Masvidal is
guy.
the only guy you're gonna get to fight him. Everyone else in the card is gonna play it safe. They got too much to lose. Jorge Masvidal is the only guy I can see in at least the top 10 that doesn't give a fuck. So maybe he's the only guy you can get to fight Hazmat at this point, other than Leon.
Yeah, well, that's something to be said as well. Jorge Masvidal and his the way he conducts himself, the way he his confidence in himself. He's not going to look at some kid who's got a few fights under his belt and be scared of him. So that's for future episodes of the Puncher's Chance.
Yes, man.
For tonight, I'm going to be editing this thing. We'll have it out for you Friday morning. Once again, thanks for joining me, Jordan. As always, it has been a blast. Everyone, you can find Jordan actually at Radio Supernova X on Twitter, not at Jordan Grenke. And you can find me at John Lodge Music. Next week, we will be talking about everything that happened on UFC 254, where we're going ahead with the UFC and the world of MMA. Once again, thanks for everyone for listening. Like, subscribe, and we'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Peace.